The most interesting thing to me, even beyond the 1, 2, 3, is just Sacramento at 4 when the draft restarts with, I don't know, kind of a seminal pick for them. You know, like they have to nail it. Either they have to turn that guy into an awesome player or they have to trade him for somebody who's awesome. But I feel like they have to come out of this draft with some sort of direction and purpose for the next 5 years, right? And it can't just be, let's take Ivey and hope he can play with Fox. Let's keep our fingers crossed. It's got to be a level beyond that, right?
I'm leaning towards it being exactly that. Because I watched Ivey all weekend, and he was awful in the St. Peter's game. I think the way it came out, if you looked at usage rate of Power 5 players in college basketball, Edey for Purdue, who's the 7'11" guy, he played not only with one 1980 center, Williams, who would be a starting center for any other team, came off the bench. And then there's another guy, 50-something, who's enormous. And all of these things are happening while Ivey is running what ended up being a really highly rated offense efficiency-wise. So you can't pull, like, Painter's an awesome coach at Purdue. But when you watch all these Purdue games, I keep kind of defaulting to, like, you know what? There's just not many people who move on a basketball court the way Ivey does. And it's not like he's just some guy like Tyrus Thomas who moves and you're like, oh my God. Like, Ivey's a better basketball player. And I'm not saying it's a perfect, but I don't know. I like, imagine being in Sacramento's office going, like, in any other version of this, we take Ivey 4, we don't even think about it, so now we're going to do something else. Then if you do that, then you probably should just take Ivey 4 and hope, hey, what if we have two insane attacking wings that can play with each other? Like, what if we do that? Because sometimes it actually can work, you know? Like, when only one guy can shot create, you have a problem.
Yeah.
So I think I'm actually kind of leaning towards, if they take Ivey, I'd almost respect more. He has a missed dunk against Texas that I'm going to send you, Bill. It's a missed dunk, and it's in my notes. It's just that impressive.
Wow. Yeah, I always do this with, I probably overrate the finals, what I'm watching, when I start thinking about the draft, because I just want guys, especially if it's in the top 12, that I can envision playing in the series I'm watching. It just feels like the wing. I know people have made this point, but it just feels like these wings are so much more important than they were even like 3 years ago. Like the fact that Wiggins was sitting there for anyone in the league. And granted, this has been the best case version of how his career could have turned out. I was so impressed with him. I watched Game 4 again. I was so impressed with him. He's like a legitimate playoff guy. Like, he was crashing the boards. He was doing all the little stuff. I think he's been their second best player in the series. But I just feel like over and over again, I would default toward wings, 6'6", 6'7" range, who can shoot and defend. I'm just always going to gravitate to those guys over whoever else you're throwing at me. Like, I'm talking about when it gets a little more confusing, when we get to that like 4 to 13 range. I just think those guys, you can always have those guys in a series like the one we're watching. Then when it gets to like, I mean, somebody like Ivey, like what would be the doppelganger for him in the playoffs? What do you see? Like, it'd be like a Mitchell on Utah type of situation. Like, what is it?
Yeah, I actually think Mitchell's pretty good.
Yeah.
Then if he turned into Donovan Mitchell, then you'd be thrilled.
That's great.
To take him.
That's worth the 4th pick.
Yeah, we're talking about somebody who's at worst a top 20 player and has flirted with higher rankings there, when we all kind of loved him when Utah was probably exceeding some of the stuff. You know, they beat the Thunder, and then they had that epic series with Denver where he and Jamal Murray were going at it. Like, you know, up until this season, some of the Mitchell playoff stuff was actually really good. So if he's Mitchell, that's terrific. But I'd love to see him away from, you know, it's tough to criticize Purdue's offense, as I point out, because statistically it was incredible. But him with space, Bill, once he has momentum with the basketball, the way he splits double teams at the top, just
you really like this guy.
Yeah, I do. I watched the under-19 stuff again, the final against France. And I always say, like, I'm a big movement guy. And if you can move like that, if you're really that special and you can play, because there's some movement guys over the years where when I was younger, I'd fall in love with, like, oh my God. And it's like, yeah, but he sucks at basketball. Like, I'd be talking to myself going, why do you like this guy? Because he moves well. Like, is he any good at basketball? And the St. Peter's game, you know, is bad. It was really, really bad. But the kid was there 2 years. He improved dramatically. And he's big too, man. He's big for a wing. So I know that we've been talking about Sacramento, how like they're the one team that lands on that pick that can't take Ivey. What are you just supposed to take Keegan Murray then because you're afraid of the fit? And maybe some teams like Keegan better because he kind of checks a million boxes. He got some.
Could you see
size.
him? Could you see him in this series?
Yeah, I do. He's not the athlete that some of the other guys are, but he fits into whatever you're doing. Like he adapts. I think he had to lead the show, and he had moments where Iowa where he was doing everything. I mean, fucking everything. He's incredibly smart. I also think he has kind of the right personality. We're never really worried about the guy. So that part of it is great. But I think, when you're talking about athletes and why teams will go. So like the Jaylen Brown pick is a perfect example. I asked the Celtics, I go, what was it? What was it with Jaylen Brown? And they're like, you know what? At that point, the first two guys, everybody knew it Simmons. Everybody knew it was Ingram. It was all over the place after that. And we just felt like his body, his profile, his athleticism, like it matched up with what one of those really good wings can be in the NBA and what everybody's searching for. And they nailed it, man. They nailed it because the Brown stuff at Cal wasn't impressive. He physically was impressive. I don't think he was that great of a player back then. So I think that's what happens. I mean, to me, Ivey's far more, he's not the same size as Jaylen, but I don't think.
He's 6'4".
Yeah.